Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the staggering economics and hidden realities of the scientific publishing industry. You know, when we think about scientific research, we usually picture brilliant minds in laboratories working late to cure diseases or solve the mysteries of the universe. But right between those incredible discoveries and us, the public, sits a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it operates unlike pretty much any other business on Earth. Now, what if I told you that the peer review system you completely trust to filter out bad science is fundamentally flawed? And worse, what if it's secretly being funded by your tax dollars? For decades, this system has been sold to us as the ultimate, foolproof quality control for global truth. But once we actually dig into the data, we uncover a fascinating and honestly pretty troubling story about where our money is really going.
To figure out exactly what's happening here, our agenda covers the peer review myth, the unpaid labor economy, the academic triple tax, a highly profitable oligopoly, and finally, regulations and future alternatives.
Let's get right into Section 1, the peer review myth, quality control or illusion. We're going to test the absolute core defense of traditional publishing, which is this idea that editorial peer review is an impenetrable shield against bad science. The theoretical ideal makes total sense, right? Expert gatekeeping prevents methodologically flawed or completely bogus research from ever reaching the public. Medical clinicians and policymakers literally rely their lives and our laws on this exact seal of approval. But the empirical reality, it starkly contrasts with that ideal. When put to the test in controlled trials, reviewers frequently miss absolutely fatal errors, things like biased randomization, terrible response rates, or completely unjustified conclusions. And the actual tests of this system are wild. When researchers ran literal sting operations by intentionally inserting deliberate fatal errors into accepted manuscripts, the results were alarming. In one trial by the British Medical Journal, out of 9 major deliberate errors, reviewers caught an average of only 2.5. Over in the Annals of Emergency Medicine, reviewers failed to spot 2/3 of the major errors. But it gets crazier. There was the famous Bohannon sting, where a completely fabricated, scientifically flawed cancer paper was intentionally submitted to over 300 open-access journals. 157 of them accepted it without catching the glaringly fake data. No way, right? And taking a look at the statistics from grant proposal studies, there's a metric called Cohen's kappa coefficient. It came in at 0.29, which basically means reviewer consensus is practically random. 2 experts are barely more likely to agree on a paper's merit than a coin toss. Mathematical modeling estimates that to achieve true statistical precision, a funding agency would literally need over 38,000 reviews for a single application. Without that, decisions are just heavily influenced by subjective opinions and prestige bias. All right, moving to Section 2, the unpaid labor economy, a global volunteer workforce. Let's pivot to the mechanics of this system and ask a very basic economic question. Who is actually performing all this highly skilled quality control that publishers are selling back to us? The reality is a totally upside-down economic model. In pretty much any other industry, a company pays for its raw materials and its labor. But academic publishers, they don't pay for the raw research papers, and they absolutely do not pay the experts to conduct the peer review or the editorial oversight. Every single bit of this is provided entirely for free by an academic workforce. Let's put a dollar value on that. In the United States alone, this volunteer workforce donates time equivalent to a $1.5 billion annual taxpayer subsidy. Globally, researchers spend over 100 million hours just formatting and reviewing manuscripts. And keep in mind, about 60% of submitted manuscripts get rejected. That means countless hours of highly specialized labor are spent on an endless reject and resubmit cycle, and the financial benefit flows directly to private commercial publishers. Which brings us to Section 3, the academic triple tax, paying multiple times. This is an incredibly unique setup where the public is charged over and over again for the exact same body of knowledge. Let's walk through how this builds up. First, you, the taxpayer, underwrite the scientific inputs. The U.S. federal government appropriates more than $80 billion a year to agencies like the NIH and NSF to fund the research. Second, the public subsidizes the review infrastructure. Those reviewers giving their labor away for free, their salaries are largely paid by public universities and state education budgets. And third, taxpayers get charged yet again just to access the finished work. So how exactly does this third tax hit? Well, to comply with demands for open access, publishers now charge authors what are called article processing charges, or APCs. For the most prestigious journals, this single fee can reach up to $12,690. Because authors generally don't pay this out of their own pockets, they have to divert federal grant money to cover it. That means over 75% of researchers report having to sacrifice actual laboratory equipment or scientific materials just to pay a publisher's fee, all so the public can read the science they already funded. It's wild. Let's look at who is actually cashing in on this. Section 4. A highly profitable oligopoly, the Big Five. Who benefits from this taxpayer-funded cycle? It turns out to be an incredibly concentrated oligopoly of just 5 major publishing houses. These publishers, like industry leader Elsevier, routinely extract operating profit margins between 37 and 40%. To put that into perspective, those margins vastly outperform major tech and consumer giants like Google, Microsoft, or Coca-Cola. In 2024 alone, Elsevier generated $1.5 billion in profit right off this model. Collectively, the Big Five, which includes Elsevier, Springer Nature, Wiley-Blackwell, Taylor & Francis, and Sage, control over 50% of the global market. They use what are known as big deals. These are massive, bundled subscription packages that basically swallow university library budgets whole. The University of California system alone was paying Elsevier $11 million a year before an historic contract termination back in 2019. But here is where the perverse financial incentives really kick in with the modern business strategy. As the industry shifts to the pay-to-publish open access model, publishers make money per article accepted. Think about it. If you charge thousands of dollars per paper, your revenue strictly depends on volume. You need to publish more to make more. This creates a massive financial incentive to lower editorial standards, sparking the rise of these mega journals and resulting in mass retractions. In fact, one major commercial publisher had to retract over 11,000 papers in a single year due to systemic quality failures. Okay, Section 5, Regulations and Future Alternatives, the policy tug-of-war. To wrap up our investigation, we need to objectively look at how federal regulations and new alternatives are trying to untangle this multi-billion-dollar knot. Regulatory policy here has shifted dramatically across different administrations, essentially creating a tug-of-war over who ultimately pays for public access. The Obama administration's Holdren memo allowed publishers a 12-month paywall embargo. Then, the Biden administration's Nelson memo pushed for immediate zero-embargo open access by 2025, which ended up shifting massive costs onto the authors through those expensive APCs we talked about earlier. Most recently, the Trump administration proposed prohibiting federal funds from being used to pay these exorbitant publishing fees altogether. That came right after a severe Government Accountability Office report warning that the open access mandate could end up costing the federal government up to $1 billion annually. Pushed to the brink, the scientific community is now championing some major structural alternatives. First up is the Federal Purpose License. This is a legal mechanism where the government can bypass publishers completely by requiring researchers to deposit their manuscripts directly into free public repositories. Second, we're seeing a huge rise in preprints and overlay journals. This completely decouples peer review from corporate publishing. You just post the science for free, and community-led platforms review it also for free. Now, some people suggest a seemingly simple fix. Why not just pay the reviewers? Well, the math creates a brutal cost-loading problem. Let's say a journal has a 25% acceptance rate. That means they have to review 4 papers just to accept one. If you pay 2 reviewers $450 per manuscript, the review cost for the 3 rejected papers must be loaded onto the publication fee of the single accepted paper. That dynamic alone adds nearly $4,000 to the final publication fee, making the financial burden on taxpayers and grants even worse. The way we manage the sum total of human scientific discovery is absolutely at a crossroads. After seeing how this entire system relies heavily on public funding and millions of hours of unpaid labor to generate massive private profits, all while struggling to actually catch critical errors, we are left with a fundamental question. How should scientific truth truly be owned, funded, and shared with the world in the 21st century? Thank you for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this sparks some curiosity, and I encourage you to keep questioning the systems that shape our knowledge. See you next time.